Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey guys, another talking head video here, and I've got one hell of an email from my good buddy Bob down in Costa Rica with some great questions. And this is actually addressed to both myself and Wayne Herbert. So Wayne may even do a secondary video, Wayne Herbert of Ozark Steelworks, the gentleman who makes the Mr. Fusions and the Shockers and the inline thumpers and the cool stainless steel submarines and all that stuff, right? Super excited about so many projects I've got going on with Wayne. But anyways, Wayne may respond to these questions as well separately in his own video. I don't know. We'll see. And I'm curious to hear his answer to the questions. So Bob says, "Hi Alan, glad you have the eye surgeries behind you. Don't worry, most of those bothersome quirks and distractions will likely pass in a few months." I hope so, Bob, because it's really getting super annoying, especially light phase changes and stuff like that. Like, it's not much, but it's just enough to know that something's a little wonky. Man, the wildfires in Canada, that smoke is down here right now in southern Indiana, and it's sort of tearing my sinuses up, guys. I apologize. So Bob says, "I recently watched a behind the bench video from 2 years ago on the importance of copper in a still setup. I hope he does an update soon, because after watching it 2 or more times, I was left with some questions. He implied that the importance of copper in the pot still setup is different for a stripping run and a spirit run, but did not seem to indicate for which type of run copper was more important. He also indicated that 2 feet of 1 inch pieces of 3/4 inch crimped copper tubing in the boiler was effective as any other copper elements in the vapor path. But he didn't say for stripping or spirit run, or for both for hobby pot stills between 5 and 15 gallons. So I was left wondering about how I could best use the information for my runs. Before I get to this, there's a follow-up with 5 questions here, and I'm going to answer each one as I go, because it'd be easier than going back and having to reread again. So, number 1, if you have adequate copper for a stripping run, are sulfides an issue for the spirit run? So, Bob, my answer to this question is going to be fairly complicated. So, for most spirits, brandy, bourbon, rye whiskey, etc., with the exception of single malt, with the exception of something with a high protein and nitrogen content like single malt, copper is not that important in the stripping run. It's nice to have copper in the vapor path of the stripping run. I would recommend that you have copper in the vapor path of the stripping run. So say you have a stainless steel still, I'd put a copper head on it. That's what I do at Spirits of French Lick. The copper itself is not that overly reactive in the body of the still, and it's not needed in the body of the stripping still, in my honest, humble opinion, unless you're running malt. That's the only place where I've seen that be a big issue. For bourbons, brandies, etc., stainless steel pot is just fine. Nice to have some copper up in the head. It's more important to have an all copper doubling still, in my opinion, and be able to clean everything up, right? Always think of it that way. The stripping run can be messy, dirty, ugly, as long as you got the tools to clean it up in the doubling run. That's the trick, in my opinion. So I don't have a ton of copper in my stripping still at Spirits of French Lick. And I have no real problem with cleaning up sulfides in the spirit run, is what I would say. Question number 2. If you put copper in the boiler along with some modest packing in the vapor path, do you believe it's best done for a stripping run or a spirit run, or both? So I wouldn't put copper at all in the boiler. I don't see any reason to. Copper in the vapor path, absolutely. I've done that many times with sight glasses, packing it with copper mesh or copper elbow pieces or whatever I've got on hand. Or in the case of Spirits of French Lick, on the big 650 gallon doubling still, Anana, we have a copper gin basket. We reroute the vapor from certain products, not all products, but certain products, particularly the 4 grain with the oats in it, and anything with wheat in it. We reroute the vapor into the bottom of that gin basket, fill that gin basket with copper packing, and then run all that vapor through that, just so I have that much more copper surface area, get that better conversation with copper, very much along the idea of Scottish thinking, right? The idea, the more of that copper conversation I have, the sweeter the spirit's going to be, potentially the lighter and fruitier it's going to be versus the heavier and more meaty it's going to become. I obviously don't do that with rye whiskey and things of that nature, but So with modest packing in the vapor bath, do you believe it's best done for a stripping run or a spirit run or both? As I said in question number 1, I think this is a spirit run thing for me. I just don't see, again, unless you're focused specifically on single malt, I don't see a reason for it in the stripping run. 3, do different mash receipts, I don't know why I can't say that when I read it. Do different mash receipts have greatly different potential to produce unwanted sulfides? For example, comparing brandies of different fruit to grain with sugar to all grain to molasses. Yes, absolutely. Lower the quality of molasses, the more those sulfides you're going to get, for example, in rum. With grain, it's all about the same unless it's malted. With brandy, it's, and this is true of all the categories, but with brandy in particular, it's very specific to yeast. So bear in mind that SO2 and H2S have to have something to bond to, and what they tend to bond to is acetaldehydes, which are produced in the heads fraction. If you find a low acetaldehyde producing yeast strain, you are going to produce not only less heads, but you're also going to have less bonding area for those SO2 and H2S compounds to bond to, and so therefore you're going to have less of them overall. This is why 2 of the yeasts that we use commonly at Spirits of French Liquor, OK Yeast and Vin 13, both are low SO2/H2S producers, or bonders as it were, so actually low acetaldehyde producers is what they are. So yes, there is a difference between different mashes. Again, to me, malt is where the copper body and the all copper in a stripping still comes in handy. It's not absolutely necessary. You just have to do a lot more cleaning on your stills if you don't have it. Trust me, I know. I figured that out the hard way. 4, he also stated that copper condensers have 24% greater heat exchange capacities compared to stainless steel condensers. Does that make copper more important for a stripping run or a spirit run? Of course, I suppose it's likely better for both, but maybe more important for a stripping run because of the heavier mass of the wash and the more rapid speed of a stripping run. So no doubt that the copper is going to have a greater heat exchange capacity. I don't know what the percentage is. I'd say 24% is probably a little low. I would think it would be a much higher amount than that, would be my guess. So to me, if I want greater heat exchange capability, as long as I have enough cooling water, I would want that on the stripping run, because the amount that you're trying to run through it at one time, right? You can overwhelm a condenser pretty quickly versus trying to really, control things in a spirit run. In a spirit run, I don't find it, and we've seen this. Wayne and I saw this big time whenever we were playing around with the outer wrapped condenser on the submarine still when he was here. It just wasn't quite up to spec as far as knocking down an entire stripping run, right? So you want higher efficiency on a stripping run in particular, because the amount that you're dealing with at one point in time and the length and duration of that run versus a spirit run, which should take substantially less time than a stripping run. Of course, I suppose it's likely better for both, but maybe more important for a stripping run because of the heavier mass of wash. Absolutely, Bob. And the more rapid speed of a stripping run. Absolutely, again, sir. To touch on this again too. So we talked about worms versus shell and tube before. So you'll see this conversation in Scotland a lot: shell and tube versus worm, and it's always copper for them. So the idea is that, again, more surface area inside a shell and tube. If you want a lighter, fruitier style of whiskey in Scotland, you're going to use a shell and tube. That's why you see a lot of the distilleries that aren't doing heavy peated scotches using shell and tube versus the ones that are doing heavily peated scotches using a worm. At Spirits of French Lick, I have stainless steel shell and tube condensers, guys. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I'm able to clean up that whiskey more than well enough just within the still itself with all of its copper contact. The 2 doubling stills are all 100% copper short of the condenser, that I don't find that I need any copper actually in the condenser itself. So bear that in mind. Also, if you're working with sugar shine, you really shouldn't be producing much of any sulfides. Little, yes, but not a lot. Not compared to like an all grain. I mean, anybody who's ever stripped an all grain can tell you the low wine smells like shit. It just does. There's no good way to say it. It's not until it goes through a doubling run that you really start to get some really great flavors and taste out of it. So, but these things are not as important when it comes to something like an inverted sugar, or because then you're not stressing yeast in particular, and you should be getting none of that stuff whatsoever. Or even to some of the, say, fruit syrups or agave syrups and things like that. They're nowhere near as important for those things. These are very specifically for heavy duty starch to sugar conversions, and complicated fruit and or molasses ferments, right? Specifically. So this is very, very deep, almost survivalist level distiller's questions here. So number 5, somewhat related, should one consider using different condensers for strip and spirit? Do you have a preference for what type of condenser is more ideal for a strip as compared to a spirit? To make it simple, comparing a Liebig, a shotgun, and a closed canister around a copper or stainless worm. I don't, as long as it's efficient, I don't have a preference on strip versus double, right, as far as a condenser goes. Now, when it comes to what I'm looking for in that spirit, again, are you going for heavy and meaty, or are you going for lighter and fruitier? And this is presuming you have the option, because I can't switch them out at Spirits of French Lick. What I have shell and tube, and I don't have a way to I could add a worm, but I don't see a reason to, because it's not part of our profile. Now, future distilleries I work on, I'm probably going to try to switch between the two of them, more than likely, depending on what I'm running at the time. But if I, say, for example, use the shell and tube on the strip, I'm probably going to use a shell and tube on the double. If I use a worm on the strip, I'm probably going to use a shell or worm on the double. Actually, what I'd probably do is I'd be more likely to use a shell and tube on the strip and then a worm on the double to make the real difference in quality on the other end, on the output side, if that makes any sense. Comparing condensers, I think I've done this once on the show before, but so you say specifically a Liebig, a shotgun, and a closed canister around a copper or stainless worm. So I don't have any closed canister worms. I have had double wall condensers, which I hate. I don't think they're worth a shit. That's just my opinion. I understand where they came from and why they were created, and they were created oftentimes, well, they were ran most often by moonshiners, and it's because they do a very, very quick condensation. And with that quick condensation, depending on the grain you're running, you're going to leave some stuff in there that you don't want. The Liebig, like the simple one shell, one tube condenser, I like those if I'm doing small batches of high proof stuff where I really want to get lab quality alcohol. Right, if I'm going to make tincturing alcohol or do something that's very precision driven where I can run a still on a drip, I love Liebigs. Other than that, on pretty much every other setup in the world, to me they're useless. Shell and tube or shotgun, the multi-tube condensers, I absolutely love. I've got a Dr. Gratis I use constantly on everything, and it's fan-freaking-tastic. The knockdown power on it, it's designed for 20 gallons, but I've had it on some big old stills before. I've had it on a 40 before and had no problem. So double the capacity of what it should be knocking down without any issue whatsoever. I work with, Gatling gun style condensers every day at Spirits of French Lick, and absolutely love them for what we are doing at Spirits of French Lick. I love worms specifically for, again, those heavier bodied, like, I love worms for apple brandy. There's a great example. I love worms for any type of moonshine. I love worms for things that I'm infusing flavor into. I think that kind of covers it. I hope it does anyways. Bob, this was a great set of questions. I would love to see some more questions like this come in, guys. So please reach out to me, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, YouTube comments below, or social media, wherever you can find me. Love y'all. Catch you soon.